You start the book by talking about how you grew up, which is very different circumstances than you're in now. What was it like?
So I grew up in a little town called Hickory, North Carolina. It's in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And my mom was a public school teacher. My dad was a traveling paper salesman. And we grew up pretty much as middle class as they come. We went to church almost every Sunday, and weekends were spent doing housework. My parents worked hard to make ends meet. I got a scholarship to go to a fancy boarding school and then later on to Harvard. And while there, roomed with Mark Zuckerberg. And the Facebook story took off. The rocket ship rise has been well documented, and my life dramatically changed. I went from being part of the middle class to very much being part of the 1%. Specifically in the book, I talk about how I made nearly $500 million for 3 years worth of work. And the fact that there's nothing else to call that but what it is, a lucky break. And in the years after that, I started to think, well, my story is extreme. It's, not everybody is a roommate of Mark Zuckerberg, etc. And I realized over time, though, that while my case might be extreme, it's not that uncommon. A small group of people in our economy is getting incredibly wealthy at the same time as everybody else is working just as hard as they have historically and can't make ends meet. And I think a guaranteed income of $500 a month for working Americans making less than 50 grand is actually the most powerful thing that we can do to not just combat income inequality, but also restore the American dream.
So the argument against the kind of proposal you're putting forward is it is a disincentive for people to work. If you're telling people you're going to get a guaranteed income, right, won't it reduce the incentive to go out and get work, and that there's something meaningful about a job that's not just about money, it's about a sense of purpose and dignity?
So I make the case in the book that jobs have changed so meaningfully in the United States that what we need to do is create an income floor to stabilize them. Whether the rise of the robots happens, if self-driving cars come or don't come, working people need basic financial stability. The people who are out there who I talk to, the vast majority of Americans want to work. People find purpose in it, people find meaning in it, and it's something that I've heard on the road, the kind of people I grew up with. I think it's something that is shared in common. There's this myth of, young guys who just want to put up their feet and play video games, or the mythological welfare queen. And I think those are really myths that we create in order to propagate certain stories, draw lines and divide, and not actually think about what's happening in the country. So in my view, I do think that if you're working and you make less than 50K, a guaranteed income of $500 a month, so if you are married, so each person would get $500 a month, would stabilize your financial life. And the evidence shows,
but you have to work.
The evidence shows that people work just as much after getting the money as before.
So the other argument is this will explode the budget deficit, that what you're describing is a very expensive program.
I think there's no two ways about it. I think a guaranteed income is expensive. There are some who say we should go even bigger. There are some who say we should go smaller. What I think is reasonable is $500 a month for people making less than $50,000. That would be an additional $300 billion to the federal budget, which is very meaningful, but it is doable. The way I recommend that we pay for it is bringing rates on income above $250,000 into line with their historical averages, about 50%, and closing the most egregious other tax loopholes in the code. So just to give a contextual scale, the tax bill that got passed a few months ago is estimated to cost between $1.5 and $2 trillion. What I'm talking about, after you factor in economic growth, would cost more or less the same, a little bit more or less the same. So anybody who says to me, oh, this is too big of an idea, well, if it's not too big of an idea to cut rates on corporations in the 1%, then it shouldn't be too big of an idea to provide real economic opportunity to the people who need it most.
When you go back to Appalachia, do they look at you because of the boarding school and Harvard and the money, but also the education? Do they think you have become a different person?
I mean, my story is different from theirs. So I still feel a sense of connection to North Carolina, to my parents, to the family that I still have there. I mean, they're the kind of people I grew up with, you know, going to baseball games, hanging out after church with, potluck dinners. I mean, all the stuff that is part of growing up. So there's a connection there that, like I imagine for most people, is enduring. But there's also a sense that my life has taken a very different course, and that does make me different. And I also think that with that privilege comes a sense of responsibility, because that is deeply tied into the same value set that I share with many of the people that I did grow up with.
Chris Hughes, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.